Buenas tardes and good afternoon. Welcome to another session of Sistemas Aplicativos Cybersecurity Conference 2022. Today's session is titled How the Threat Monitoring Contributes to Cyber Resilience, and it will be conducted in English with Spanish translation provided. For the last 15 years, the Verizon Data Breach Report has provided us with the understanding of that security operations can often focus on the wrong approach. Rather than enable businesses to thrive, security professionals often chase compliance, vulnerabilities, and the perfect control set without understanding the true risk to the organization. In this last year's 2022 DBIR, it again highlights that our organizations are mainly targeted by external actors with financial motives, with ransomware leading that way. The new hybrid working conditions, coupled with growing integration with IT and business operations, are often expanding attack surfaces. Organizations must be hyper vigilant to the ever-spreading cyber risks that move to a position and continue to move to an informed attention to improve detection and response capabilities through our shared intelligence. Today, we'll be talking about how effective use of the cyber intelligence can radically increase an organization's cyber maturity and resiliency. Today, we're joined by two distinguished panel members. The first is Edith Santos. Edith Santos is a managing director of digital forensics and incident response at Tracepoint. She is the 2022 Executive Women's Award nominee in the 2020 Cybersecurity Excellence Awards Cybersecurity Person of the Year. Edith is responsible for strategic execution and delivery of client incident response investigations. She also has an extraordinary passion of protecting organizations and the public from the effects of cyber attacks. Edith has held positions in DFIR leadership roles in top 10 multinational financial institutions, global technology innovation firms, and she also spent 20 years of her career in law enforcement. She's a very thirsty person for investigating cyber crimes, and we welcome her today. Also joining us is Jasmine Chavez. She's the manager here at SISAP for our Cyber Threat Intelligence Services. She is the 2022 E-Commerce E-Woman Award nominee. She's also a passionate leader in the Cyber Threat Intelligence Service team at SISAP, as well as in the region. She has a bachelor's in science of computer from a university in Guatemala. Currently, she has started to manage a product as the co-founder of Mujeres TICs GT, which vision is to educate, inspire, and motivate and involve more women in technology. Jasmine has been also active in our educational activities related to technology in the community and improvement, such as participating as a JavaScript mentor in the Coder Dojo and teaching Linux courses. So welcome, both of you. So my first question is going to be to Edith. We've worked together for quite a while in the past, but I've known in the past few years that we've seen three different trends accelerating in the market, and there's tension amongst them. First is how to be competitive in a fast and evolving business landscape. The second is how to defend against increasingly serious cyber threats. And the third is how do we achieve both goals while reducing complexity in our digital transformation. So my question to you is how is threat intelligence transforming these trends?
Well, I'll start by saying that in today's day, threat intelligence is not only an option, but it's absolutely necessary. So as a business, it's your duty to protect your clients, your brand, your reputation, because this threat landscape is evolving every single day. And everyone wants to sell you a piece of that intelligence for protection. Just a simple example in today's current market, just the market size for MDR alone is $2.16 billion with a projected growth of $5.6 billion by 2027, and it's $13.8 billion by 2030. That tells you how quickly MDR alone is growing with monitoring along with threat intelligence within it. So in order to be both competitive and also be able to defend, you need a solution that provides continuous, fresh threat intelligence that can help you prepare, detect, analyze, contain, and eradicate that active threat from your environment.
Fantastic, thank you. Do you see and do you see any of how do you see threat intelligence changing how we look at those serious cyber threats that we see? I mean, obviously, from an understanding standpoint, the more we understand, the more we can prepare for. So, how do you see threat intelligence evolving in terms of cyber threats?
So that's really kind of why I enjoy this area, right? Because it does change all the time, right? Threat actors, um, they're in a group and then they divide. They get either mad at each other. There's wars, things like that happen, and they come up with new programs, new ransomware. They're always evolving. As technology grows, they're going to find loopholes. As we make it harder for them, they're going to find ways to go around it. So when new vendors are out with new technology, they're going to find a way to get in. At the end of the day, they want to get in, and they want to get that money from you. And so it's always changing. It's always going to be a matter of trying to learn from them. What are they doing? How exactly are they doing it? So it's important. It's important to always be one step ahead, and intelligence, gathering that intelligence is what's really important.
Perfect. Perfect. And that transitions me into my next question for Jasmine. I mean, Jasmine, threat intelligence services has many threat monitoring components, and those components consist of things like but brand protection, intelligence management, open source intelligence or open source indicators, intensive investigations. How do you feel threat monitoring supports the objective of cyber resilience?
Well, here is important to notice the concept of threat monitoring, that is searching out events that can constitute violations of a system. So that's why we need threat monitoring. Recall all the objectives for cyber resilience. For example, the first one is prevent or avoid. Here we need to know what we need to make to avoid the incident for our company. So maybe with service like brand protection or open sources investigations, we can know which kind of incidents could affect our company. So that's why we can use threat monitoring in advantage from our companies. And also for preparations, we need to be aware of the threat landscape so we can take some actions to be prepared for a specific threat. In the constraint objective, threat intelligence helps to know how we can get the threat and also which could be the best recommendations. In the reconstitute and understand steps, it's important to be really sure which are the scope of those threats that can affect our companies, and that will help us to be preparing new plannings and also to start with the solution or re-architect how the things are doing in the company.
No, thank you. Thank you. And that's a good thing to bring up. I mean, threat actors are changing, right? I mean, they're changing their actions, but they may not change their motives. I mean, motives are generally limited. So, um, as they continue to evolve, we continue to evolve. And looking at those threat actors or those bad guys, I know, Edith, you have some considerable experience. I mean, 20 years in law enforcement, as well as, experience in the private sector for financial institutions, as well as, being an innovator in the DFIR space. I mean, based upon your experience, how can we use threat monitoring now to help customers prior to incidents?
So I'll actually start by telling you that most of our customers, so as a DFIR firm, right, we help customers from all sorts of, type of incidents. Most of them are ransomware incidents. And about 95% of the customers that we assist, they don't have any monitoring in place, right? So even even at a minimum, they don't have an EDR solution in place. So if they don't have one, we will deploy one because it's a must in every single ransomware incident that we're going to investigate. So it's so important to them, or they see the value of it, that at the conclusion of the investigation, at the conclusion of the incident, about 90% of our customers end up keeping that solution in their environment. They realize how important it is, that could have helped them from preventing the incident to begin with. Now, we have had customers that we've helped that do have an EDR solution in place, but they may not have an MSP or a SOC or MSSP or somebody else monitoring that for them. And that helps them. Having an EDR solution helps. Having someone not monitoring them still gives them, there's a reason for them to call us, right? So they may have an incident, the solution may have contained it, they may have isolated a device, but they still come to us for assistance because they saw something strange, they saw something odd because the tool isolated it. So now they need assistance from us. What exactly happened? They need to complete a due diligence. They want that peace of mind to make sure that the threat actor is not still in their environment. And in most cases, the tool did what it was supposed to do. But had they had, a team or someone monitoring that, they could have, already answered all those questions for them. But at the end of the day, at least for the very minimum, having that one solution in place could have helped them avoid a catastrophic event, like a ransomware incident.
Right. So, I mean, sometimes what we see is, there's that false sense of security. We've got a technology in place, right? But, if no one's really monitoring it and if it's not alerting or properly configured, you're probably not getting the appropriate information for action. So one of the curious things, and I'm going to go a little bit to the side on here, one of the curious things that I think is when we think about threat intelligence, right, we think about specifically what we're getting from the outside. You mentioned EDR. You can talk XDR and some other technologies here, but there is threat intelligence that comes from the inside. Do you have any experience? I mean, can you elaborate a little bit more on how you're using that EDR for that to gain that understanding of what's happening on the inside of the environment and how that builds resiliency?
Yeah, so really, again, I think we go back to what Jasmine said earlier, right? So it depends on your solution, and I think we're going to talk about this here in a second, but it depends on the solution. It depends on the type of what do you have in place? Are you updating signatures? What type of what's going on in your environment? What type of organization are you? Who are the type of threat actors coming in? How often, are you updating, or do you get fresh, um, updated threat intelligence being fed into your solutions? Is there someone else outside of just that solution looking for threat intelligence that's specifically towards your type of organization, or your financial institution, or your healthcare? Right now, we're looking at education's been hit quite a bit, at least here in the U.S. So there's lots of ways to get that intelligence and feed it back in. especially if you share intelligence with other organizations. You are able to get IOCs, push them back into your environment as well, and see what's going on within your environment because of it. But it all really depends on your organization. What do you have in place? I mean, you can't have a set of data that was intelligence from 10 years ago, right? All of that evolves every single day. So you're going to have to continue to keep up with it.
Right, right. There's a lot of information out there. It's getting it into the appropriate places and getting it from the appropriate places. That's really critical
Correct.
to success in understanding, where you actually sit in that landscape. Jasmine, I know, Edith, we talked a little bit about feeding into incidents. Do you have any specific examples of how cyber threat intelligence prevented or helped customers recover from an incident?
Yeah, I'm going to continue the example for the ransomware. Currently,
Okay.
my favorite example is the recent Conti attack to Costa Rica. So we have our threat intelligence department, and we are always keeping the IOCs updated. So our clients from SOC present some intent of connections, but any of them went breached by Conti. That's a good example of how threat intelligence could help an organization to avoid actual ransomware or an actual threat that is affecting, in this case, an entire country, that is Costa Rica. And also to recover from an incident, it's important to know what are you going to do. So, for example, with Conti, we work with our incident response team to give them all the tools and all the important information about the methodology, about the technique, about the way that the Conti is going to act, so they can find the correct indicators of compromise, and also they can recover as soon as possible the companies. That's the objective of the incident response team.
Fantastic. And so, with all the work that you did with our customers and even non-customers during that really, really hectic time when Conti first broke out, what are we seeing as potential drivers to ongoing threat intelligence for those people that were affected by Conti? Is it brand protection? Is it a combination of stuff? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think that it's a combination of stuff. For example, as Edith said, one of the things is some companies has the tools, has an EDR, but it is not correctly set up. So that's why the ransomware could attack the company. And also, some information like some logs are not correctly sent into the monitoring tools, so that's why they didn't know that someone or something is in the network. And that's why it's important to be really aware what tools we have, how we are using that, and if they are really protecting the organization.
Okay. Okay. I know, Edith, you worked on stuff for Conte in region as well. Is there anything that you can elaborate on that you see as continuous needs in dealing with situations such as Conte?
Oh man, I'm gonna say the exact same thing that Jasenia saw. A lot of them is some of them had the tools, they weren't configured correctly. And a lot of them some people didn't know what they actually had. Some people did
Right.
not have an understanding of their environment. They don't even know how many systems and servers they had in place, had no idea what belonged to them, whether or not items, were theirs or not. So the threat, I think, on the incident response side, we can always gather all the IOCs and stuff, and we can deploy and be able to contain and look for them across an environment. But if you don't know what's part of your environment, I can't help you, So
Right.
I think a lot of that, we saw a lot of that, especially with Conti, was a lot of organizations did not know, did not have a good understanding of their architecture or their environment. So knowing that ahead of time and having some type of organizational structure of the environment can really, really help.
Right. And we, it's amazing that we continue to see some of the situations with across, not even in region, but what we've seen across our career, and it continues to happen today, is people really don't know what they have, right? So intelligence comes from not just knowing what the adversary is, but knowing what we have to protect. And basic things like knowing your assets, knowing your critical assets, knowing your crown jewels, what to protect, the layers that go into protect them. That all goes into cyber resiliency. That all goes into building a environment which is protected and is resilient to adverse events, right? Those things are going to happen. You just need to be resilient to be able to recover from those.
And also,
So,
Greg, I would like
go
to
ahead.
add there that threat intelligence and threat monitoring could be the differentiator in be or to have an incident or not, because many of the companies are getting new information about threats, about maybe new threat actors, and also new vulnerabilities, but this information is just passing away in the companies, so they are not taking an action or are not taking a plan to start building some preventions for those new threats and avoid any incident in their companies.
Right. In indicators of compromise can also, or not post-incident as well. They can be pre-incident, right? There are certain key intelligence things that can be gathered that can, when put together in kind of a puzzle, can be indicators of something that bad potentially can happen. Brand monitoring, open source intelligence gathering. I mean, those all lead into precursors to attack. I know from my experience, and I know from SISAP's service offerings that we've seen actual dumps of credentials prior to attacks that shows up on that monitoring. So it's
Oh,
not post. Go ahead, Edith.
I was going to add something that Yesenia said, and it reminded me of a client who basically said, you know what, we're just going to recover from backups. And sometimes people don't understand that they have no idea how long the threat actor's been in their environment,
Absolutely.
right? Um, and we're like, well, you may want to know whether or not these backups have your threat actors IOCs. Oh, we'll be fine, and all this other stuff. So they decided we don't want to talk to you anymore, right? So then about 3 days later, they called us back because their backups became encrypted. So
Right.
back to the same place where they were,
How far do you
So
actually go
not
back, right?
exactly, exactly. So also knowing how to recover, practicing, that recovery plan is also necessary.
Well, adversarial tactics are becoming a more and more often discussed thing, right? How bad actors are doing things, and how often they do them, right? We talk about indicators of compromise, but some of the intelligence that we see is some of these guys are really, really patient. And the reason they're really, really patient is because the payout is really, really good, right? So they can afford to sit and wait. They can afford to sit for months let your backups get accumulate to the point where they're, even if you had an objective, let's say it's a month from warm storage, they're going to be beyond that. So it's going to be more painful for you. Understanding those tactics and getting that threat intelligence, whether it's through threat feeds, whether it's through your partners, your vendors, it's really key. But you also have to make sure that you're reading those and applying those to your environment. So I'm going to pause here. I know we've got a big audience right now. I want to make sure that everyone knows that if you have a question, you can ask it in the chat window or in the QA window. Please, if there's something that you would like to ask an individual, you can point it directly to any one of us. And we'll get to those questions here towards the end of this conversation. Okay. So we've talked a lot about resiliency. We've talked about security programs, but to have a really good security posture, it's all about building awareness. And we've talked about intelligence that we have not only builds awareness of the people that are using to protect businesses, right? Those defenders, those people in security groups, those people in security teams, executives, right? But it's also about building awareness of the threat landscape and those people that are coming in. We've talked about, specific sectors like financial. I know FS-ISAC, there's a lot of ISACs out there. I would highly recommend that if you have a specific vertical that you're in, do some research and find out if there is actually a threat intelligence or threat sharing or information sharing group out there like an ISAC. But understanding or building the awareness of that threat landscape and the focus on the resiliency of the organization, I mean, that's all part about threat intelligence, right? In your guys' opinion, I'm going to limit it to 2, but I may ask for 3 here. But what are 2 of the key factors that organizations should incorporate in their threat intelligence programs or services that they can get to achieve their goals? So let's start with Jasmine.
Okay, one of the keys is to be aware of the threat landscape, so they can have a really understanding of what can affect the organization, and not to just get that information or just to get that threat feed. Start making processes so someone can help the organization to have maybe a vulnerability management plan, maybe a security program that could lead to protect of new threats. And the second one is like kind of to build a cybersecurity strategy, because cyber resilience depends on what we really know of the assets, and also to how we will act at the end if an incident happens in the company, so we can make sure that a recovery could happen and the business continuity could be secure and not really affect our clients. That is the most important thing for any company.
Fantastic. What about Edith? What about you? What are the 2 key factors that you think can contribute to organizations' ability to achieve their goal through threat intelligence services or programs?
Well, I'll say through services and programs, really, because, and I only say, I'll focus on that simply because I see it quite often. Know what you invested in and know its capabilities. So what did you invest in and what are the capabilities? So for example, we worked a case, I'm going to give you 2 examples. We worked a case in where a client had a solution, a platform, an EDR solution deployed to the environment. It had everything covered, all the servers, all the endpoints, all covered with this solution. And the client still got hit with ransomware. and it impacted all of the domains. Why? Because the threat actor was able to send an uninstall command to the agents successfully. It did not require a unique code to uninstall. For whatever reason, this platform didn't require that. So, you need to know what you invested in and the capabilities of that solution. Another client got hit with ransomware, even though they also had a solution, an ADR solution, installed across all the endpoints. However, they had some legacy Linux, some legacy Microsoft operating systems in place, and this EDR solution did not have, agents available for those legacy operating systems. So the client decided, well, they don't have anything available for that, so I'm not going to install it on here. Well, guess how the threat actor got in? Through those systems. And so they got hit with ransomware. So know what you invested in, know what the capabilities are, and is it a fit for your organization? So, we see this often. And you pay a lot of money, so make sure that it's a fit for your organization.
Right. Right. I mean, those are great examples. I can add a little bit from my experience, right? I'm going to add my two here as well. One of the best, I'm going to build off of what Edith says here, and I'm going to build off something I said earlier, right? Know what you have, right? Knowing what you have is critical to understanding how intelligence programs and services can help you. If you don't know what's in your environment, you don't know what is going to affect you. I mean, anytime you get any information from the outside about specific threats, you may or may not know how that has affected you, right? From a grand scheme of things, yes, we have Microsoft, but Edith pointed out, specific situations where those one-offs, those legacy systems, those proof of concepts that were proof of concepts yesterday become, mission critical tomorrow. You need to understand what those are and protect those in dissimilar ways, right? Layered controls, but understanding what your environment is and is very critical to understanding the information that you're going to get around those from your threat standpoint. 2, know how to protect those, right? Build a robust security program. And a robust program uses that baseline of knowing what your assets are and developing specific guidelines or controls around protecting those, right? Not everything has to be protected the same way. Protecting everything at the same level becomes very expensive and tiring because you're going to be chasing ghosts, right? If you protect with additional controls those assets that are more critical, stuff that has the crown jewels, stuff that has, mission critical capabilities, if you protect those with more controls, you have the ability to be more resilient from a business standpoint, right? So if one machine in a lower level gets compromised, that your controls are going to prevent that happening from a higher level. Okay, so those are my two. So I am going to ask one additional question here before we get into the QA. And again, I remind everybody that there is a QA function. Please take your time. We won't be taking QAs verbally, so if you put them in the chat window, we'll make sure we get to them. I see a couple right now that we'll jump to here in a second. But Edith, what do you think the future of threat intelligence is, and how is that going to play into maybe how organizations understand and protect for future threats, right? Things on my mind right now is we're hearing a lot about, AI or machine learning, right? Protectors are not only the ones not only using that. I mean, adversaries are using that as well. So how do you think threat intelligence is going to change?
Man, it's a good question. So, we see AI in the sense of, I think it's, yes, I think it's going to be helpful in the sense that For example, my credentials, I've never hit that server before. All of a sudden I do. Is it because someone has my credentials, or because I happen to have a need for it and I have access to it? So it should hopefully alert and let somebody know, hey, Edith has never hit this server. There may be something wrong here. But yeah, the threat actors are learning that as well. Are they going around it? They are going to the same training that defenders go to. However, they're going for other reasons. So um, it's always trying to stay one step ahead of them. In my role, I feel like we're always one step behind them. However, I am in a reactionary role based on what I do, always investigating, as opposed to trying to prevent. I'm always trying to figure out how they got in. But regardless, it's a lot of the information and the intelligence that we obtain is by actually talking and having these conversations with the threat actors. So knowing where they come from, knowing, believe it or not, sometimes there's honor within the threat actors, within the groups. They have different ways that they do business. Knowing sort of how they do business helps us for future cases. At times, we've been able to get decryption keys, at no price. So and it's all based on the intelligence that we've been able to gather from previous cases. So a lot of it is really communications. So I think it's really a combination of different things. It's going to be technology. It's going to be going in there and continuously communicating with them. It's going to be trying to find those loopholes as technology advances. So I think it's just it will continue to evolve depending on the technology, the advances of technology as well.
Right.
And sharing,
Adversarial
we got to
perspective.
share.
Yeah, absolutely. Adversarial perspective is always an interesting thing. I mean, I've had some experiences in my career to where I was paid to evade not only logically but physically and to gain access into environments, and it's really a different mindset to turn your perspective on an environment, thinking not from maybe not from the goodness of your heart, but to achieve a goal. So I know there's a lot of good feeds out there that have a lot of ex-hackers or white hat hackers that think from a different perspective. So I mean, that's a great example. Jasmine, from your standpoint, how do you see threat intelligence changing in the future?
I am totally agree with Edith's opinion. One of the keys that could lead threat intelligence to other level is sharing information. I think that sharing, no maybe which company, no sensible information, is sharing what happened, how the company recovered, which indicator of compromise are involved. It's the part of the threat intelligence, and that is what helps other organizations to be prevent and also proactive. So I think that is the importance of sharing, and also with what will help us to be another level.
Right. So I mean, sharing information is critical. I mean, both of you have mentioned it multiple times. I will continue to reiterate that. Verizon, we opened up this conversation talking about the DBIR. Verizon has the ability, using the VERIS framework, to share information anonymously, right? Sharing that information allows other people to understand adversarial techniques, how things are happening, and so on, but also not having any information that is attributed to you as an organization. Organizations like FS ISAC, and I know there's some other ISACs out there, they do something similar, right? They have verticals where they have sharing of information. They have platforms that are non-attributable to the organization. One of the hardest things that you have to deal with is people don't want to share information about what's happening that's bad to them for fear of looking bad. But the only way that we know how to protect our environments is how to learn from experience, or from the experience of others, right? And how they learn from us. So, I mean, and those are great examples, and I appreciate both of those. We do have a couple questions here. Again, I implore you, if you have a question, please put it in the chat window. That way we can get it answered. There's just a few here. I want to get through them. So, first question is, how effective is the use of a centralized solution to integrate security platforms such as a SIEM in order to prevent and respond to threats? And how do you feel about open source solutions? So I'll start with Edith. Edith, any thoughts on integrating things like EDR, XDR into unified platforms?
Yeah, there can be lots of advantages to it, right? Again, we need to make sure that everything is configured correctly. We want to make sure that everything is fed correctly. The important items, right? One of the things that actually most of the items that when we're talking to clients and I'm looking for firewall logs, they typically don't have them or they've rolled over for an incident. And I say that because think about the important things that are needed during an incident. Make sure, prioritize those items, what items are needed. Make sure that those are, kept longer. Make sure that you're gathering the correct data that's needed in order you've got to figure out what happened so that we know how to prevent it in the future. So sometimes people are like, oh, I just want to get back to working order. But if you don't know what happened, it's going to happen again.
Well, continuous improvement is critical, right? And the only way to continuously improve or improve is to understand where things work and where things don't work, right? Jasmine, what are your thoughts on integrated solutions for security platforms?
Those integrations right now with the technology could help also to take some automated actions. So it could help to the companies to react as soon as possible to threats that are already known, and that the actions could be set in those tools. So I think that it could help them to do that. And with the open source, I think just we need to be sure that the community of that open source tool is going to be updating it, because sometimes you will not have support, and if there is no one that is supporting that tool or reviewing the code, maybe it could be with vulnerabilities in some time. So just be careful with that.
No, I think that's an absolutely good recommendation. And I'm going to incorporate my response here into one of the next questions that I have, or I see on the screen here. Is the next question is, what kind of software do you consider for monitoring for cybersecurity, right? Throughout this entire presentation, we've talked about EDR. We can talk about extended detection and response. So from a monitoring standpoint, it's depending on your environment. EDR, endpoint detection and response, is going to be critical to be able to identify things when they happen, respond to those things. How we extend those back into platforms, XDR platforms, it is also very important. And I'm going to answer that first question with this, right? My top thing for a centralized solution is correlation, right? If you have a lot of different monitoring tools in your environment, you're looking at a lot of different screens. It is hard to maintain what's happening on one screen with what's happening on 3 other screens. when you get into correlation like either a SIEM or an XDR or even a SOAR platform, those things get correlated, and that you can pick up and respond to in XDR and in the SOAR fashions, respond to those in automated, non-human intervention actions. That allows for a quicker in action, and it also allows for a reduction in the expansion of any threat into the environment, such as ransomware. If you can detect it early, you can limit it to just a few machines. It's not going to affect your entire environment. But when you're looking at 4 or 5 different platforms, things that are managing Windows, things that are managing Linux, things that are managing your servers, it's very difficult to correlate if something happens here and something happens here, that we can prevent it from happening in other places. So, all right. I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to close this down. Intelligence is all about knowing not only what you have, but what your adversary has as well, right? There's a lot of security practitioners out there, especially in the US, that like to quote the art of war. I won't lay into the art of war on this call, but I think there's a lot of good things that are in having, the intelligence and understanding of how your adversary acts. But intelligence is more than just adversarial, right? It's knowing the information that you have from your systems, you have from your environment, that you have from your teams, and being able to execute that in a strategy in which keeps your organization resilient to bad things happening, right? Bad things will happen. I don't think I've met a company that hasn't had an incident that they could recognize and say that it did not affect them from a monetary standpoint. The question is how and what do you have to make intelligent decisions to be resilient against the next bad thing? Thank you, everyone. I appreciate you joining today. I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.